Yeah, so thank you so much for making time on a very, very lovely day. Obviously, this is what I like to call the Goldilocks weather. It's not too hot, it's not too cold, it is
Just
just
right. Just
so
right. Like it.
you could be doing a lot of other things, but you're here with us to share your why wisdom and your knowledge to help us get our house nice and toasty during the winter season. So thank you
I
so
will
much.
do my
So
best, but no, thanks for having me. So,
oh no, I know. Every time I speak to you, I always learn something new every time. So I'm sure this is going to be very good. So yeah, so tell us a bit about how you got into this in the first place.
I grew up on the van with my dad, from like, I don't know, 7, 8 years old, just passing him tools and, I suppose just literally being his extra, his labourer, his helping hands. And I got into I grew up around this industry. So
All right,
when I eventually wanted to get into business, this is why I chose to go into the plumbing and heating industry. I've had 15 years in B2B sales and
all
marketing,
right.
and I just felt that the market needed someone that, well, as an SME, a business of my size, I think it's better to come at it from a consumer's understanding, a consumer's point of view, what's their pain points, what they're looking for, and delivering a really good service, rather than maybe other companies my size that are founded by people that have been on the tools maybe all their
Yeah.
life, and they've got skills and they're trying to grow from the tools out, which is a bit of a different tactic. So I think it is a USP for me anyway.
Okay. So I mean, even though I hate to admit it, it's getting close. Summer is winding down. Even though right now the sun is out and it looks really lovely, and
Yeah.
we're getting to the dreaded winter, and you know the whole thing is about figuring out how do we optimize our heating. What are the tips and things in preparation for winter? What are the things that we ought to be doing to get the best out of our heating, basically?
Yeah, so obviously with the way the economy is going, inflation, energy prices, big topics, there's definitely a lot more interest in how people can just be more, let's say, more green, save
Yeah, yeah,
energy, and ultimately save some money. Now, I understand that um, you know there are many ways we can do that with the things we have at home already. So things like valves on our radiators and the thermostat on the wall. Just turning it down a degree or two can
yeah.
really make a big difference over time. Um, there are controls on your hot water cylinders. There are controls on the front of your boiler, and if you get it calibrated and set up right, you could be saving just 10% in energy use that way. But I suppose over and above that, tweaking your system and the things you have, you could be looking to upgrade things. So again, there are smarter controls. Uh, there are smarter ways of managing your heating from outside the home. So in particular, I know a lot of your clients have second homes or third
Yeah.
homes, and they travel the world or whatever it may be. So if they don't know when they're coming back into the country, and that could change flippantly from week to week, then
Yeah.
actually being able to control that before they set off or when they land off on the plane, turn the heating on so the house is ready and warm when they get in. But there are lots of, as I said, smart, yeah, someone's commented, wear thermal clothes. I mean, it's not a bad
Well,
shout, to
yeah,
be honest.
you can do that too.
Yeah, and we should. I mean, some people sit there in shorts and a t-shirt and heating on 23 degrees. And before we didn't care, maybe now we do. But even down to things like, I think you mentioned in a previous conversation with me about some houses just struggle to get hot in certain parts of the
Yeah.
house, and the main living areas are sweating, and but some of the bedrooms in upstairs are not getting warm, and that can just be down to balancing the system. So getting a
Right.
heating company in like us would help. What we would do is go around and play with the radiator valves so that the ones closest to the heat source, the boiler,
Yeah.
aren't taking all of the demand of the heating before it reaches the other parts of the house. There can be circulation issues. So as systems get older, they get contaminated. So you have a product in the water called inhibitor,
Right.
a chemical that basically stops the water and metal, oxidizing, creating rust, debris,
Right.
sludge, whatever word you want to use. And people that they add water to the system, they top up the pressure, they get it serviced every year, but they don't really add more of this stuff. So anyway,
Right.
systems that are a bit older, you find that they become more viscous. The water's viscous, so the system has to work harder to get that water traveling around the house. That means if it's working harder, it's going slower. It's going to take longer to get to 20 degrees. Therefore, you're using more gas and fuel to do that.
Right.
So there's lots of ways you can maintain your system, clean your system, tweak your system to make significant energy improvements.
Right. And you mentioned something earlier about switching your heating on and off even during the summer just to get the valve working? What's that about? Like, so
Yeah,
right
so
now in the middle of summer, I'll switch it on for a few minutes, an hour.
yeah, so really, the tip there was, even in a typical home during summer, sometimes we leave the heating off for the whole of the 6 months,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that could be because literally the weather's good. I mean, but leaving things off completely, you've got pumps that circulate, you've got valves that open and close, and one of the most common issues we get around this time of year going into winter is, hi, I've got hot water but I've got no heating. I've got heating but no hot water, and really that's just one of the valves getting stuck in an open position. And often it can just need freeing up, but sometimes it seized to the point where the motor's died and you need to replace that. So just constantly, every now and then, turning your heating on and off is just putting it through the motions of starting up, firing up, and
right,
making sure
right,
that it's working and moving and doing what it needs to do. Keeps it nice and free. Best
right,
way to
right. Okay, and how long would you do that? Just switch it off for a few minutes or
just turn on for a few minutes. I mean, if the pump circulates and the valves open and close, then it's kind of done what we've set out to achieve. Yeah, you don't want to be putting the heating on. I mean, you'd have to crank it right up on a really nice day,
Yeah,
right?
I suppose. I mean, the last few weeks. I mean, what was it? 2, 3 weeks ago, we had 42, 40. Was it 42
Yeah,
degrees?
something
I
like
can't
that.
even remember. That's how bad it was. I just kind of traumatized, and I just don't remember what it was like. But
Yeah.
yeah, but so now that we've got the ball. Obviously, we've got people that are asking questions like, well, at least someone was asking me recently. So, should they have underfloor heating, or is it better to have like the normal with the older versions? Or do you get what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
what are the advantages underfloor heating versus what's the other one again?
Well, just traditional radiators, I guess. I think it depends on the house and what you're doing. So if you've got a project where you're doing a new build or you're doing significant renovation works and you're getting everything up and out, walls and floors up and everything else, then it might be nice at that point to consider underfloor heating. But to retrofit underfloor heating in a normal home can be a challenge. You've got to think about floor levels
Right,
and
right,
certain things like that. But in older properties, I mean, underfloor heating it works very well, but it also is one of those that isn't as instantaneous as heating with radiators. So imagine a vacant property, a nice big house. It's going to take longer for that underfloor heating system to get that house hotter to
right,
temperature. Whereas radiators, obviously because of where they're positioned on walls in the room, they can give off heat a lot quicker. It's also advised that, during even cooler months, when you do typically maybe set your heating to go off during the day, underfloor heating is always recommended that you just turn it down to maybe like 16 or 17 degrees, so that
right.
it's at a tepid level and doesn't take so long to increase up to that 20-degree mark again, so rather
Okay.
than
So
just
when you
turn it
say it
off to
takes
zero.
longer, how much longer would it take? Because I know there are two types of underfloor heating. I think it's hydronic and electric, right?
Yeah, so electric is literally like a wired element. Think of an electric blanket in the old days on people's beds and whatnot. Sorry, my bad.
Got your back.
Uh, yeah, so, but the hydraulic or the wet systems, they work off your
Mhm.
boiler.
Right,
Again, they you've got 10 mil pipe work, so a centimeter of actual pipe work is the lowest profile. Well, you can get an 8 mil, but
right,
you've got to consider getting that pipe work in the floor. So you may, if you've got concrete floors, have to chop it down, or all your doors have to change because now you've built up the floor by
right,
20 to 30 mil. So retrofitting underfloor heating, wet systems can be a challenge. Wet systems tend to be better for larger areas. So if
right.
you've
Okay,
got say you just extend your kitchen out and you've just added 5 meters by 5 meters to the back of your house, it's possibly not worth putting underfloor heating in just a small area like that. It
right,
would be worth going for electric because of the cost, the setup cost, if you like, the hardware cost for all of the kit, and to get that back to your boiler and all of the controls, an electric system is much simpler. I think when you've got things like sort of heating systems in modern buildings, again with good insulation,
yeah,
it's going to be efficient and work well. When you're retrofitting and adding extensions to older properties, you might want to consider like radiators in conjunction with underfloor heating. So
okay,
you've got like people like those designer column rads that kind
yeah,
of go
yeah,
up the
yeah,
wall, so you may have like a lot of glass and small spaces for radiators, or the traditional long wide ones. So go for something designer and cool and funky as part, look at it as a feature in the room. you know.
Right. Okay. And you said obviously with the you mentioned the two things I want to mention. Now I'm getting tripping over myself.
So
You mentioned servicing the your the heating, especially because of all the sludge that kind of get logged in, and also the fact that there's a chemical you put in. So when you do, obviously sometimes we have to flush systems for our clients. Is that the
yes,
right time to also sort of like put that chemical in? And how
yeah.
often should you do that really?
Well, so we have a piece of kit which is a AD Pro Check kit. So it's almost like a litmus test
Right.
paper test. We can actually test the water quality to see how much debris and how much chemicals are in that water sample we take, and that would tell us if there's a high contaminant level, then we should be considering a power flush, as you mentioned. If it's got a low chemical level, then we should be adding chemicals. So
Right.
yeah, I mean, as part of a standard service, it's not something we do every time. But if we feel there are circulation issues or any complaints in the way that the heating system's working, these are ways we can kind of do some initial checks.
Okay.
Obviously, again, for some of your high-end clients where people just want everything done, like the Rolls Royce, no kind of expense spared kind of thing, then of
Yeah.
course we could go through the motions of ticking all of these boxes on a regular basis. In an ideal world, we would do that.
Yeah.
Another thing we were speaking about offline was gas safety testing. So,
Yeah.
I was kind of waxing lyrical about the fact that industry and the law states that as a landlord or someone who rents even a room, so technically speaking, if you rent just your outbuilding in the garden or a small box room for one day of the year, you've become a landlord in the eyes of the law. If you
Right.
are a landlord, you have to have what's called a gas safety test carried out in the property. And really, that's checking for gas leaks on from anywhere from the gas meter through to every appliance. We will look for drops in gas pressures at your gas hob, fires, boilers, etc. And really, what we're looking for is an escape of gas. So where the law states as you being a landlord, you have to do it to protect the people occupying your property you rent to them. Why do we as homeowners not want to protect our families and our own homes with the same mindset? So it may not be law to do it, but I highly recommend that you have a gas safety test taken periodically. It may not be mandatory. You may wish to do it every couple of years, but it's one of those things I would highly recommend to anyone. Um,
Yeah.
so, and just so, just saying out there, because I was as shocked as maybe you will be, but the fine for being a landlord and not having a gas safety test is unlimited on financial fine and
Unlimited.
possibly unlimited and imprisonment is also
Okay.
a viable.
So that's
Uh,
how important it is, but it's only applicable, or at least it's only considered compulsory for landlords. But like you
yeah,
said, if
yeah,
it's that important, if it's that big a deal where you have to have an unlimited fine or imprisonment, then I guess it means it's something that one needs to not just consider, but put it as a you know high on the list of things you should be doing for your house, for your
yeah.
family, as I said.
Protect your
Okay.
own family. Yeah, protect your
All
own
right. All
family in the
right.
same way you might do your tenants. You're just not obliged to do it. That's the difference. So yeah, as a gas company, it's what we promote. We promote, yeah, having your boiler service every year. If your boiler is within its warranty period, it's a prerequisite of the warranty for all manufacturers that you have that service annually on the
Okay.
anniversary of its installation. If you fail to do that, then you could be 5 years into your ownership of a Worcester Bosch boiler, for example, and some major organs inside that fail. You report it to Worcester Bosch, they send an engineer and say you haven't had it serviced for a couple of years, your warranty is void, you'd have to pay for the parts. Now,
Right.
some manufacturers are more lenient, and certainly COVID and everything else meant that there's kind of a lot of breaks in people's service scheduling and stuff like that. People
Yeah.
kind of just didn't get around to it or didn't want anyone in their house. So I think there's a bit of flexibility at the moment, but it's just again to be mindful of that. That white box on the wall looks fine, but you don't know what's going on inside and what damage is being caused.
Yeah.
And
So
that's
that
what
means the
they're.
manufacturers, and that's included obviously in the warranty period. So, but
Yes.
that's not something the manufacturer will tell you. That's up to you to obviously call them or not. And if you don't, then it's sort of your responsibility. I take it.
Yeah, it's like anything. Any a vehicle, or you have insurance policies, but you're in. You're obligated to be as factual and precise with the information you give. So there'll always be terms and conditions, right, with these things.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah,
just, as I said, making sure your boiler service every year means that I guess we're coming in, we're checking it's safe, we're checking it's working as it should. The controls or settings could have been manipulated in the last 12 months, and we get those right. And then we know you've got a healthy, happy system that's going to see you through the winter, because
yeah,
lo and behold, it will be the coldest day of the year, or
yeah,
the wettest day of the year, or a Sunday morning when the family are coming round, or whatever. The problem will arise, and it will be a case of, if we looked at it last month, we would have seen that thing that's dripping onto that thing that's caused
yeah,
that to
yeah,
blow, whatever.
yeah,
So,
yeah. So while you're talking about dripping and leakage, and that brings me to another thing, which tends to happen quite a bit in houses that we tend to manage, either because of air conditioning or just leakage due to whatever. So, I mean, what are generally the triggers for leakage in heating and in an air conditioning system? How does one avoid having those kind of situations, especially for
um,
empty homes?
yeah, so empty homes is one thing. So where we were talking about, turning your heating on and off at various times,
Mm-hmm.
it certainly in colder months, if you have if the fabric of your building is free, is cold, that will cause condensation and moisture and mold even. So, vacant properties, certainly rooms in the corners and, close outside walls, you find that they are more prone to mold. So actually having heating on a low level periodically during winter months, even in a vacant property, is advised. The same way people say, oh, that's the spare room, no one sleeps in there, let's just turn that radiator off.
Right, right.
Equally, you could be causing similar issues, and you've got a condensation or ventilation issue. You're having the window open, that first click, or whatever you can do just to make sure that the room is breathing, and that there is some heat getting into the fabric of that room periodically during colder months. That's again, another thing we recommend you do.
Okay,
But you
okay.
mentioned sort of leak detection, and there are a couple of ways to kind of look for this. So as with some of your clients, I know that you may need to attend the property, or even on a monthly basis,
Yeah,
again as part of their terms and conditions of the insurances they have for buildings or home contents, whatever it may be. So if you're going in once a month and you're looking at the system pressure, so if it's a sealed system, most modern systems are, they'll have a pressure gauge on the boiler
right,
or
right.
around the boiler or around the hot water system, and we will see that the pressure has dropped. And if the pressure has dropped, it can only drop for one reason. That's because water has left the system. Now,
Right.
on boilers and cylinders, you have safety devices that if the pressure builds too high, they will throw water out of the system. They'll eject water to
Okay.
protect the system from technically blowing up, right, for want of a better term. Um, However, if those devices are in good working order and it's not that, then there must be a leak on the system somewhere. And the amount of times we go to some, nice houses, and there will be a small leak in the loft on a secondary hot return pump, and the
Right.
scale is building up. Imagine like uh, icicles building up on
Right. Right. Right.
in a cave or whatever. I'm trying to think. You can picture just like this build up of white crust that just goes bigger and bigger and bigger
Yeah.
around like a
Yeah. Yeah.
fitting or a pump or something. If you've got any evidence of that white crusty limescale around anything hot or moving, get it looked at, because that's where you're losing the water. And that's where you're going to have situations where the water drops to the point where the heating doesn't come on, and then you're calling out an emergency heating company because you need heating for the weekend, and really it was just a maintenance issue that could have been avoided.
Hmm.
So there's things
But
like
can
that.
those be picked up when you do the annual check, or is this something that you need to do as well in the interim in between that?
It's I think it comes down to two things. During a traditional boiler service visit, we wouldn't necessarily go around the whole house looking for
Yeah. Yeah.
evidence of a leak somewhere. If you, as the homeowner, explain that you're always topping up the pressure, we've got to start looking for the reasons why. And it could be a very small pinhole on the back of a radiator that, when it's on, the heat or the water that's leaking from it just evaporates, and it's almost hard to find or ever find, right? So we do have products and chemicals like leak sealant products that we can put into the system. And think about, I don't know if you've ever seen those bike inner tube things, slime, or you can get it for cars. You
Right.
put that product in that kind of crustaceans up and like fills the hole. It's a similar kind of scenario, similar
Okay.
kind of idea. This product would, if you like, fill any very small fine pinholes in the system that stop,
Okay.
slow but steady leaks in the system. Um, outside of the central heating system, though, there is quite a bit of technology out there now coming into the forefront. Like Hive do this, which is probably aimed more at the small to large residential. Some of the bigger
Yeah, yeah.
residential properties you look after possibly have, much more elaborate systems that this may not talk to, and there may well be kit available for those too. But you can buy products that clamp onto your incoming cold main supply, and
Right.
they
Yeah.
will monitor. You can almost tell how much water is passing through that pipe, and it will work out that if it's a very, very small amount, it will almost tell you there is a leak somewhere in the property, because you're consuming too small an amount for it to be a purposeful use of water. Does
Right.
that make
Right.
sense?
Right.
You're
Right.
not opening a tap
Yeah.
for a drink. You're not flushing the toilet. You're not having a shower. This is small and insignificant, but enough to call it a leak. And
Right. Right.
there's tech out there that's going to help you do that. So again, some insurance companies are stipulating that you need some of this stuff,
Yeah.
certainly
Yeah.
again in
Yeah.
these nice big homes. But again, from a kind of homeowner point of view, if you know you're topping up the pressure, if you're seeing a stain appear somewhere and it's small but it's getting bigger, draw a pencil line around that watermark and see how it progresses.
Yeah, because that's always a nightmare when a client says there's a leak, but you can't quite see the stain because it's dried up. And
Yeah,
because it's a kind of like intermittent issue where it's not constantly there, but it's
yeah.
there every now and again. It's almost like, finding Wally. You
Yeah.
can't quite,
Leak
you don't know
detection's a
where it is.
challenge. It can be a real challenge. It really depends where it is, where it's coming from. But I know from having my own children, sometimes just that one rogue bath where the kid chucks 10 litres out the bath when they're splashing could mean that water found a crack it just doesn't normally find. You don't
Right,
need to necessarily always freak out the first time you notice a leak. It sometimes is a case of noticing the leak, making a note of the time of day, or what have you just been using? Have you just had a shower, or did you have the shower half an hour ago? And therefore, does it imply the water is not leaking directly with use of the shower, but is more
right.
an after effect of the shower? And so keeping a bit of a diary and mental note of these things are really useful information for a company like us when we come to look for that leak.
Yeah, yeah. Because for us, it's always by the time we call a company like yours in, that's been going on for a while, and no one ever remembers what part of the room, when it happened. And
Yeah,
then this goes on for ages, just trying to figure out, is it the air conditioning? Is it the heating? Is there like a pipe? And I mean, there's so many options
yeah.
that make it a nightmare to just fix a problem, and you're investigating and investigating. It sounds like it's not something that it's not a straight line kind of answer. It's one of those things where you literally have to investigate, and the client has to be more, or the landlord has to be more aware of taking notes when they do see those things. Otherwise, it's just
Yeah, well, look, it's human nature to see a leak and just get all excited and call people up, right? But as I said, if you put a bit more thought into where it's coming from, when it happened, does it keep happening? I'll give you a very quick example. There's sometimes a situation where the water only leaks when the adult uses the shower, but not the children. Well, then it might
okay.
imply that the adult's heavier and is depressing the shower tray down that little bit more, which
Ah,
is causing a gap around the silicone at the bottom of the shower tray. Now we have water ingress, whereas we don't with the children. Simple things like that. So just making notes of how and when and why this thing happens helps us get to that. But we've had situations where we've had to take chunks out of walls, and then the next wall and the other side of the wall, and cause significant damage, for want of a better word, to actually find the source of leak.
yeah,
And it could
yeah.
be a really old fitting from 30 years ago that just decided to give up the ghost. So it's
Okay.
all
So there's
swings.
not real way to avoid it. It's just really, so there's not real way to avoid it. It's just being vigilant. Oh, I think I've lost you for a bit. Are you still there? Can you hear me? Technology at its best. Let's see.
You got me? I'm back.
Yeah, I can. Okay, well, okay, because I wasn't sure. You kind of froze for a minute, and I was like, do I still have him? So,
Yeah.
so ultimately, it sounds like it's not something. It's just something you have to keep an eye on. It's one of those things where there is no real way to avoid it altogether.
No.
It's just something that you need some technology that might help you prevent it. Well, maybe not prevent it, reduce the chances of it, but ultimately you can't really avoid those kind of things, can you? It's just
No, it's
life.
more things like so I think, again, sorry, because there's obviously a few people to watch this at various times and they'll come at it from a different angle, but where we're talking about large homes or vacant properties, in particular second homes, that type of thing, If you've got tech that's going to notify you, we believe there's a leak, that's helpful because we're preempting the problem, we're getting
Yeah.
to it
Okay.
because you're not there to see the leak happen. The other thing would be simple things like if you were having planned 6 months sabbatical from living in a property, it wouldn't be that bad an idea to maybe consider draining, any tanks that are full of water, to
Right.
turn off
Right.
the incoming mains if it's not required for anything else, to actually kind of isolate and have, some preventative, planned things done to prevent the risk of any leaks.
Right.
Um, I forgot what else I was going to say. And things like, when you're a landlord as well, knowing where the stopcock is, that's number one.
No one
Some
ever knows.
people, yeah, when the leak happens, they go, I think it's in this cupboard here. And they have to empty it out. And then they go, no, or it's behind a cupboard that was newly installed. The guy who fitted it didn't, make a hole at the back, or it's under the stairs, or it's on the street level, but they don't have the key. So knowing where your stopcock is, primary number one. If you're a landlord, I mean, you can get products like there's a thing called Sure Stop, and it's basically looks like a light switch, but you flick a light switch, it turns off your stopcock. So it
Right.
goes before the stopcock on the system, and we fit it in with it's got an air tube and literally like a light switch on the wall. So they're ideal for landlord situations where you don't want to risk the tenant not being able to get to a stopcock or
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
understanding what to do. Flick a switch, damage hindered,
Averted.
yeah,
Yeah.
averted. And then the other one would be like elderly people, that would even struggle to turn a stopcock.
Right.
There's lots of scenarios where that
Okay.
could be a useful thing for them. But yeah.
Yeah, because that's the first thing we do. Because when we do our asset, when we take on a new property, we do that whole where is everything, where's the fuse board, where's the cox board. Just because otherwise, on the day where you have an issue, you don't want to spend the next 30 minutes or an hour trying to find it. Changing a
Yeah,
big house when you just don't know where it is. So
yeah,
yeah, that's something I found. No one ever really knows where it is, and it's just a nightmare trying to find it. But yeah, so I mean, talking about now that there's something you mentioned a while back about home MOT, because you mentioned about cars and
yes,
you mentioned a service that, and I find it quite fascinating because it's something that we want to introduce to our clients, which is just going through all the things that will make sure your house is functioning at optimum level. So
yeah.
talk to me about this home MOT, because it sounds like something that, everyone should be doing, landlord or not landlord.
Yeah, I think when it comes to generally looking after the the heating and water entities in the home, it's all about doing things like, as I said, turning things on and off to check that they work, so they don't seize up. It's doing things like, for example, like taps. So if you are, if you've got a 5-bed house, 5-bed, 5-bathroom house, there will probably be a couple of rooms that you would consider guest rooms. You
Yeah,
don't ever
yeah,
really use them, but actually running the shower on fully hot regularly is going to stop things like risk of Legionella, because you could have
right,
water sat in that pipework for 6 months, never use it, and Legionella could be a risk there for you. So running the shower on hot periodically, if you've got cleaning teams or maintenance teams or people like yourself going in, they should be looking to run all of the showers on full hot for 5 minutes, as once a month if they can. Little things like
right,
that are going to really help. Opening and closing taps, again, it's going to stop them scaling up. Thinking about scale, I mean, certainly in sort of London areas and Surrey where we operate, it's quite a hard water areas, and if people
yeah,
haven't got filtration systems or lime scale treatment or filter, water treatment systems, often these homes have very nice brassware and appliances, and they could be getting killed with just on a simple thing like scale. So, I've been into some nice homes and we've changed taps that are worth £1,500
wow,
for new taps that are £1,500 just because they've scaled up and got ruined over time, or shower valves and things like that, and yeah, so if you're going to spend the money on the brassware, spend a bit of money on the preventative um,
yeah.
things around looking after those appliances as well.
Yeah, that's always the issue because it's not a one-time thing. It's just want to keep that, all the equipment working for longer rather than being in
Yeah.
a situation like every other year, you've got to change them. There's a
Yeah.
cost of getting those items, and then the inconvenience of having to have everything replaced again. So, but with
Exactly.
the hard water thing, which is a big issue with showers, lime scale and all that, is there any, what's the preventive measures to do that? Because obviously you don't really have much control of the water, but then it does damage quality from your kettle all the way to everything
Yeah,
else.
it makes cleaning difficult. Shower screens get watermarks, whatever. So if you think about it, there's some misconceptions. People think like water softening is the answer, but water softening is the addition of salt. So you're adding to the water. If you do limescale reduction, you are removing from contaminants from the water. So there's two ways of treating water: to add stuff to it to make it softer, or to remove stuff from it to make it less harsh or less
Right,
contaminated.
right,
So,
right,
in an ideal world, again, you would do both. I think in my home, I'd be inclined just to at minimum go for limescale reducing items. So you can get an inline scale reducer that goes on the incoming mains. It's
right.
magnetic and fundamentally it goes through like a gauze and set of filters. The unit itself is about £400, couple of hours to fit it, and that's going to protect most things in the home. It won't reverse what damage has been caused, but it will stop further limescale
Damage.
contamination of sanitary ware, shower valves, even things like your washing machine and everything else. So
Okay.
there are things out there that don't cost a lot of money, but can be very beneficial to the home. In some of these bigger properties, yes, with these plant rooms, they're likely to have been designed by a mechanical company that would have put a lot of this stuff in, I would imagine. But
Right.
again, even if they did, those things need maintenance. The filters need changing every 6 months, again, depending on water consumption, or the salt needs added once a month. So there's always a maintenance consideration with these items as well.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So to end this, because obviously being one of the things we said at the beginning, just before we got online, was being more green. And
Yeah.
obviously being more green could also mean being even more economical, being the area that we're in now where heating is a bit of a big topic. What are the main, if there's any top tip that you would give us that you'd say like this, if we don't do anything else, do this one or two things?
Um, to be honest, I think the biggest things is really looking at controls. So even looking at the thermostat on a hot water cylinder, there will be a thermostat on there that's telling the boiler, we need hot water, we need hot water, we don't need hot water. If that's set a couple of degrees too high, you could be getting your hot water to set, let's say 70 degrees, right? And when you then have it at a shower, you don't have a 70-degree shower. You mix
Right.
hot with some cold to find your comfort zone at around 35 degrees. So why are we boiling our water to 70 degrees? We can boil it as long as it's over 60 degrees. It meets water regulation standards. It has to be 60 degrees and above. So between 60 and 65 degrees would be ideal. And you would be saving energy by not asking the boiler to heat it to 70 degrees every time you have a shower and a bit of cold is added, and it's boosting it back up to 70 for no reason. So small tweaks, timings on and off. When are you getting, when are you heating that cylinder up? Are you heating that cylinder up an hour before the family get up and have their showers, or do you just leave it on all the time and therefore it's topping up through the night potentially? There are things that I mentioned before, like if you've got bigger properties, it may
Mm-hmm.
be that we look at all of the settings for each of the zones. So each room or each radiator could have a thermostatic radiator valve. So once we've balanced that system, we kind of say, right, we set that as it is, and this radiator set at level 4 is going to get the room to a comfortable 20 degrees in line with the hallway, which is 5 times the size, and needs the radiator to be a bigger radiator, obviously at level 6. So it's about getting that balance so that the whole house feels about 20 degrees when the thermostat says it's 20 degrees. So
Right. Yes.
those balancing all that is going to make a big difference to energy usage.
Okay. Well, we've got one question here, which says, are the newer homes better for optimizing heating and water or not?
Well, I mean, it's clear as day. Modern homes now are just much better insulated and fabricated. So there's a lot more, woolen and foam insulation from every, in the walls, cavity walls, ceilings and lofts, and concrete subfloors if you're in blocks. So yes, modern homes, a typical modern 2-bed flat may have an 8 kilowatt boiler in it. whereas probably the average home 3-bed house is probably having a 25 kilowatt heat only boiler.
Right,
um,
right,
you need my point being is, yes, insulation is key here, and some of the older houses, they're just not privileged enough to have it. You can retrofit, you can retro insulate. They're all those things are going to help, and there are government schemes for that, and there are companies that specialize in that. So if you do feel you've got a particularly old property, glazing is another major issue
right.
here.
Hmm.
Even small things like, the aperture around your front door. How many people have drafty front doors or drafty back
True.
doors? And guess what? Their thermostat is in the hall next to the front door. And when that cold breeze comes in, the thermostat goes, oh, it's 19
Right.
degrees. Let's turn your boiler on for 5 minutes to get it back to 20. When you're sweating with a woolly jumper on watching Netflix.
So does that then mean
there's
that even where you put your thermostat really matters? Because if you're putting it somewhere
yeah, it
that
does.
it's not actually giving you a good read, is it? Because you're getting
No.
a. Mm,
Some people have their thermostat above a radiator in the hall. Well, guess what? When the radiator comes on, the hot air rises, tells the thermostat we're at 20 degrees now. It cuts off, but the house is still cold. So then you find there's people that go, oh, my house, I have to turn it up to 23 degrees, 24 degrees. That's just because your thermostat's probably in the wrong spot, not because you're cold-blooded or warm-blooded or whatever it is. So, it's little things like, yeah, placement of a
mm.
thermostat is king.
That's because I was actually, yeah, because we had a client we had an issue with where for some reason there's a part of the house that felt it was hotter, but when you stood there, it wasn't, but it was close to the radiator when I think about it now. So, but okay. So we
Yeah.
have got another question. How do you change the temperature of the boiler? Is that connected to the thermostat? I don't know this.
Okay, good question. So some boiler, I mean, basically it's current regulations to make sure that you have, if you fit a new combination boiler, or if you fit a new boiler, in fact, we now by law under Part L regulation, we have to put thermostatic radiator valves, the ones with numbers on. You
Right,
have to have those on every radiator in the home to meet current regulations. If you were dead set against having it done, I'd have to get you to sign a waiver and say I didn't want them, I didn't want to pay for it. But fundamentally, as a company, that's what we should be promoting and enforce. Now, the same with combination boilers. Combination boilers, you open a hot tap, they fire up, they give you hot water, you turn the tap off, they close down. With the heating side of things, people just would use an on and off situation and turn it on and off and really not have controls. But again, Boiler Plus compliance requires us to put smart thermostatic controls in a home that will either compensate for weather outdoors, and things like that. Now, I'm realizing I'm probably going off your question. The boiler itself will have numbers on, so it may have a radiator symbol and a hot water symbol, and it will have levels like 1 to 6.
right,
Really, what that you're setting there is the temperature the boiler produces water at and sends to the relevant source. So let me put it
right,
into context. If you're if it says 1 to 6, let's just use numbers. Let's say that 6 is 60 degrees. If you turn the hot water dial up to 6 on the boiler itself, it will
right,
send 60-degree water to the hot water cylinder. That's not
right,
accurate, but I'm trying to make the numbers easy. If you turn it down to 5, it will only send 50-degree water to the cylinder. Your cylinder could be set at 60 degrees, but it will never get 60 degrees water
right,
because your boiler setting is overriding this. Same for the radiators. The dials on the front of the boiler only determine how hot the water leaves the boiler and goes to your radiators or goes to your hot
right,
water cylinder. That is not the best way to set it. You are better having them up at max at 6 and letting the room thermostat and a cylinder thermostat take control of what gets heated
right.
up to the right level, basically. So if you don't have a wall thermostat, or you've got an old twisty dialy one, then you
Yeah,
definitely need
yeah,
to talk to companies like us, because there are much easier ways to control your heating that is definitely going to save you money. I mean, we're a big fan of Hive in particular, for a
mm,
typical domestic home. They work with Alexa and Google Nest, Google Home, sorry, and Apple Home. They have their own app. You can add TRVs, again, that you can control from your phone. So you could control bedroom A and
right,
bedroom
right,
B
right,
from your phone. You could add light bulbs and alarm systems and all sorts of kit to the Hive system as well. So it does start bringing you into the world of smart home.
yeah, yeah,
So we really like the Hive system for that. And again, they have a leak detection module. and all sorts of things. So if any of your clients or anyone listening is interested in knowing more about that, I can definitely point you in the right direction. Or Hive's website is very good at showing you that. But yeah, we can help you with that.
Okay. We've got one more question, which I was actually thinking about. So
Okay.
when you mentioned the thermostat, obviously the placement of the thermostat is clearly very key.
Yeah.
So where should we put your thermostat then? If obviously putting it close to the door where there is the draft coming in isn't a good idea, and putting it close to the radiator because that gives you the wrong read, doesn't quite work. So where should you put it then? And can you move if it's the one you've got already?
Yeah, it depends. So again, there are some thermostats that are hardwired into the wall. So like literally
Right,
the power cable is running from the boiler to the thermostat on the wall. Modern stats come with RF, radio frequency. They're wireless. So those ones can be moved around the house. And I think it's about finding that room or spot that you would consider to have the best mean temperature. So if you know the hallway is a cold room generally, or that you spend a lot of time in that kitchen, living room, diner, that new L-shaped room that you spend most of your time in, then maybe put the thermostat there, because that's where you want the comfort
right,
level to be.
right,
If you
right.
are going to spend your evening in those recreational areas, you're probably less concerned that when you get up to your bedroom it's a bit below par, because you're going to get in a big duvet and go to sleep
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah.
But I think there's some science around cooler sleeping conditions as well. So think about the most used areas or the biggest areas and look for a better mean average temperature. That would be the best place to put your thermostat.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much. Actually, thermostat one was it's actually really key. And the switching off and switching on, that's something that I did. We do it for client, but not the way you mentioned. Something that we need to obviously, incorporate in what we already do with the clients and their homes and how we look after it. But yeah, this has been absolutely amazing. But thank you so much. And thank you everyone. And I hope if you've got any other questions, you can send it through